Hello everyone, tonight I will tell you a story about a place that should not exist. A place that many people claim is only a rumor whispered in dark corners. A place that hides in plain sight until the clock strikes midnight, and only then does it reveal its secret doors. Tonight we speak of the library that opens only at midnight, a library filled with books that do not tell ordinary stories but hold the fate of those who dare to read them. Imagine walking through a small forgotten town where the streets empty early, where people close their shutters before night fully falls, where lamps flicker as if afraid of the darkness, and in the center of that town stands an ancient building, boarded up and silent, a building most people pass by without a glance, its windows dark, its doors chained, but if you stay long enough, if you wait in silence for the last chime of midnight, the locks unfasten themselves, the chains fall away, and the heavy wooden doors creak open to reveal a darkness deeper than the night itself. That is where our story begins, with a young student named Adil who had always been drawn to the forbidden. He had heard the whispers of the midnight library from elders who swore it was cursed. He had read about people who entered but never returned, and yet he did not believe in curses. To him, they were simply tales to frighten children. His curiosity became unbearable until one night he decided to see for himself. Armed with nothing but a flashlight and his stubborn courage, he walked the empty streets of the town, the silence so complete that he could hear the sound of his own breath. He reached the library at 11:50 and sat across the street waiting. The building loomed before him like a sleeping beast, its windows black and unwelcoming. The clock tower nearby began to toll, each chime louder than the last, and when the 12th stroke echoed through the night, he saw it happen. The chains rattled as though moved by invisible hands, the lock snapped open, and the doors slowly swung inward, releasing a breath of cold air that smelled of old paper and damp stone. Heart pounding, he crossed the street and stepped inside, the doors closing behind him with a finality that made him shiver. The beam of his flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing towering shelves that stretched into shadows, dust floating like tiny stars in the air. The silence was overwhelming until he realized it was not silence at all. It was the muffled sound of whispers, countless voices murmuring from the books themselves. He stepped closer to one of the shelves and pulled out a book at random. Its cover was blank, its pages yellowed, but as he opened it, words began to form before his eyes, black letters spilling across the page like ink being freshly written, and he realized with a chill that it was his own name at the top of the first page. The book told his story from childhood, every detail of his life unfolding with eerie accuracy: his first fall as a child, the name of his first teacher, even the private thoughts he had never told anyone. Page after page his life played out until he reached the end where the words were not yet complete, the sentence unfinished. His breath caught as letters began to appear slowly, spelling out the moments yet to come, and finally the manner of his death. The book told him he would not leave the library alive. He slammed it shut in terror, his hands trembling, whispering to himself that it was impossible, that it was a trick. He shoved the book back onto the shelf, but the whispers around him grew louder, dozens, hundreds of voices calling his name, urging him deeper into the aisles. He walked quickly, the shelves towering higher, the air colder, the flashlight flickering though the batteries were new. Everywhere he turned he saw books with blank covers, books that waited for a hand to open them, and as he passed them he could hear faint screams mixed with whispers, as if the souls of those who had read them were still trapped inside. Suddenly his flashlight died completely, plunging him into darkness. He froze, listening, the air filled with pages fluttering though there was no wind, and then a faint glow appeared at the far end of the aisle, a single candle burning on a wooden desk. Beside it sat an old man dressed in black robes, his eyes hidden in shadow, his long fingers resting on a massive leather-bound book. Adil approached cautiously, each step echoing too loudly. The man raised his head and his eyes gleamed pale in the candlelight. "You opened your book," he said, his voice soft but carrying through the silence. "Once you read your story, you belong to the library." Adil stammered that he wanted to leave, that it was a mistake, but the old man only smiled sadly. "The library chooses who may enter, and none may leave unchanged. With a slow, deliberate motion, the man pushed the leather-bound book toward him. "This is the book of endings," he whispered. "It holds the final lines of every soul who has stepped inside." Adil's hands shook as the book opened by itself, its pages flipping violently until they stopped at a blank sheet. Words bled onto the parchment, forming his name at the top. His throat tightened, the candle flickered, and the air grew heavier. The words wrote themselves slowly, telling him he would try to run, that he would find the doors locked, that the shelves would shift to trap him, and that the library would never release him. Panic took hold. He slammed the book shut and ran, his footsteps pounding against the stone floor, the shelves around him groaning and shifting like living things, closing in on him, cutting off paths, the whispers now screams, books falling from the shelves, bursting open to reveal pages filled with blood instead of ink, faces pressed against the parchment screaming silently. He stumbled, scrambling back to his feet, the glow of the entrance faint in the distance. He charged toward it, praying it was not too late. When he reached the heavy wooden doors, he shoved with all his strength, but they did not budge. The locks had sealed themselves again. His breath came in ragged gasps as he pounded on the wood. Behind him the whispers gathered, a storm of voices chanting his name. His flashlight flickered on briefly by itself, revealing hundreds of pale figures standing between the shelves, all holding books pressed to their chests, their hollow eyes fixed on him. He screamed and struck the door again, and in that instant the candlelight from the desk flared brightly behind him, the old man's voice echoing across the hall. "Once written cannot be undone. You are now a story." Adil felt something cold grip his ankle, pulling him backward. He fought, clawing at the door, but the strength drained from his body, darkness closing in. His last sight was the book of his life lying open on the floor, the final words bleeding into existence. Adil struggled at the door, but the library claimed him at last, and then the ink stopped, the candle went out, and silence returned to the midnight library. Outside the world remained unaware. Doors chained once more, the building standing silent until the next curious soul arrived at midnight. And somewhere deep inside the shelves, another book whispered quietly, telling the story of a boy who thought curses were only stories. A boy who learned too late that some stories are alive.